Welcome, bienvenue.
Karibu.
Akwaba. Welcome everyone to the third annual Unstoppable Africa, the flagship event of the Global Africa Business Initiative, proudly brought to you by the United Nations and the African Union and hosted by the UN Global Compact. Welcome.
This forum is far more than a gathering of minds. It represents a bold vision of the role that Africa must play in shaping a sustainable global future for all of us.
Unstoppable Africa needs our unstoppable efforts to driving sustainable and inclusive growth for Africa
This
and
forum
the
is
world.
far more than a gathering
Friends,
of minds.
Africa's not just participating
bold vision of the role that Africa must
in
play
global conversation.
in shaping a sustainable global future for all of us.
Unstoppable.
Yes, I think there was an echo. So just replay the video.
Africa is leading them. And as the world confronts challenges, Africa offers solutions, whether in energy transitions, digital transformation, or inclusive trade.
So we will lead. You see, one thing that we have to get clear is that nobody will develop Africa but Africans.
If we do have access to capital, how are we deploying it to drive the one thing that ensures resilience, economic sustainability, which at the heart of it really comes down to infrastructure.
Everybody is talking about energy transition, electric vehicles, right? And Africa will determine that. We are not going to, again, be poor by exporting our raw green metals. We want to make sure that we are actually adding value to that.
Getting people access to energy, it's also climate action for the continent. We estimate that about 50% or so of the solutions have to be off-grid. And most of that is actually going to come from an endowment Africa has, which is the sun, which is already distributed in a way if you think about it.
Solar is clearly a huge opportunity. It's today the cleanest and cheapest energy, and a glaring opportunity in Africa, which will create not only direct investment opportunities, but also jobs, because we need to maintain solar panels, etc.
Within Rwanda is the ability to look at how do we couple broadband connectivity investments together with energy infrastructure investments.
Basic connectivity infrastructure is fundamentally important. It's one of the reasons why we've been investing in all these cables, connecting all of Africa with itself, Africa with Europe, Africa with Asia.
We have 42 currencies, 42 payment systems. Businesses cannot operate under that kind of environment, and that is why we have to also deal with the payment system to domesticate all payments. If you are going to trade within Africa, you use African currencies to trade.
This is the only continent with the most dynamic indicators. One way or the other, everyone will end up doing some business with Africa one day, to my opinion.
We are going to have the largest working youth population by 2050. How do we ourselves harness this youth so it becomes a plus for us and for the rest of the world and not a minus?
The most compelling opportunity in Africa, and one of the most compelling globally, is the unlock of the digital economy, because that takes everybody along.
AI is expected to contribute 16 trillion to the global economy by 2030. That's bigger than the economy of India and China combined. We need Africa to have a share of that pie.
AI has a diversity problem. Africa can solve and fill that void by producing inclusive technologies, not just for the continent, but for the world.
Connectivity should become a right. Internet access should become a right for everyone.
Most problems require that the private sector and NGOs and oftentimes government come together, because if we all add what we can add, that's when you actually make the most progress in solving a problem.
Forums like GABI are so critical because they shape policies, investments, decisions that will define the future of not just Africa, but global economies.
The diversity in, our educational system, our backgrounds, and all of that, it adds so much value to any team that we're a part of.
There is so much talent and so much hunger. You're seeing beautiful designs come from these incredibly talented people. We should invest in them because it's going to shift the globe.
African music had the fastest growth of all segments of music, plus 27%. The big thing is to invest in Africa and the right infrastructure, especially to manage the music rights.
Ayo lele, ngana leliye, ayo lele, il voulait pas que je m'en aille, j'ai dit m'en aller.
And this forum is just the tip of the iceberg of what is coming for Africa. We are unstoppable until we are the potential that we believe we are.
Yeah, man, I try to do this. Again. Cheese. Ngolo ngala ye ngala ye. All right.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that video as much as I did. I mean, the event was truly, truly phenomenal. If you're just joining us, welcome once again to this online press conference, the launch of the GABI Unstoppable Africa 2024 Highlights Report. Now, before we introduce our speakers, just some ground rules. If you have some comments, questions, please drop them in the assigned chat box. Do not forget to include your name and the name of your media house so that we can ask the questions. Now, today is all about the launch of GABI, like I mentioned. So please, we'll appreciate if your questions and comments reflect this. Now, from addressing energy transitions, and ensuring sustainable power to advancing digital transformation across sectors and promoting inclusive growth, the Unstoppable Africa 2024 event truly positioned the continent as a leader in the global pursuit of a more equitable and sustainable future. Now, with us today to share more about the Unstoppable Africa 2024 event and the key highlights of this report, as well as GABI's 2025 plans, is Sanda Ojambo, Assistant Secretary General and CEO of the United Nations Global Compact. Sanda, we welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Sanda is not here alone. She's joined by Charles Morito. Charles Morito is the Director of Sub-Saharan Africa Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google. Now, Google has been a great partner, advisor, and supporter of GABI. So together, Sanda and Charles, we'll be sharing insights and answering all of your questions, or as much as possible. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen of the press, welcome Sanda. Sanda, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary. And Charles, thank you so much for making the time. I know you're sitting in Nairobi, Kenya. We value Google's partnership and the important work that you do, not only just for GABI, but certainly for the continent as a whole. I'm sure you'll talk about that a little bit later. So ladies and gentlemen of the press joining us, thank you for your time. Thank you for being, unstoppable advocates for Africa and the GABI agenda indeed. As Rosemary has mentioned, we're here to do two things. One is just to recap the incredible year we've had when globally Africa has been at the center of so much dialogue. But secondly, we've been able to bring together a conversation platform, an action platform that is really driving forward progress on energy, on digital transformations, on inclusive growth and trade, and the opportunities in the creative industry and the sporting industry for Africa. All of these areas are areas where there is extreme talent, resources, GDP on the continent. And we believe at the UN Global Compact, in partnership with the African Union, that the time is indeed right to create a platform where we can showcase Africa's potential, its unstoppable business, trade, and investment potential. And that really is the thought behind Unstoppable Africa. I'll talk a little bit about, what we've been up to in the past year. I know many of you joined us in various capacities over the year, but also talk about the future and what that looks like. Since 2022, when we first launched the Global Africa Business Initiative, which I'll now refer to as GABI, we brought together global leaders, policymakers, captains of industry, entrepreneurs, investors, and other stakeholders for impactful discussions about Africa. It indeed has been global. We've also, put the world lens onto Africa as a partner and as an investor for this important initiative. The purpose of this report, which I'll talk about shortly, is simply to highlight what we've been able to do over the course of the year, show that we've been able to turn ideas into action, highlight key takeaways, solutions, strategies, and actionable steps. Just a quick background as to how we got here. As I mentioned, we launched in September 2022. We have the patronage of the UN Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, and we work in close collaboration with the African Union, who are so keen to see this as a premier platform where we can showcase Africa's business, trade, and investment opportunities. The Global Compact is honored to coordinate this, along with many esteemed partners, CEOs, and leaders, including, of course, Google, as we'll hear about shortly. We focus on 5 key areas, and I just want to highlight them because they remain so central to the discussion we're going to have on our future plans. And it's energy, the digital transformation, inclusive growth and trade, the creative industry, and sports. Underpinning all of this, we know are the credentials that the African continent holds, wealth of critical minerals, clean energy sources, a large youthful population, a huge consumer market, an innovative culture that many want to exploit and really bring to full fruition. So lots going on for the continent. We want to make sure that Africa is at the table as plans and investments are being made, but also that it positions itself as a strong and great global partner. So back to why we're here today, and I apologize because I know my lights have just gone off in the office. But we're here to launch this report. I'm sure you will all have a copy of it pretty soon. It's a summary report of the activities over the year of the Global Africa Business Initiative, but really focusing on Unstoppable Africa, which is the flagship event of the initiative. It's a convening that is held in September in New York amidst the high-level week that we hold here. And it's really when we kick off our activities. We've been able to bring together heads of state, captains of industry, and a global audience to really look at what Africa can and should do for the world. Last year in 2024, the theme for the year was Shaping Global Ambitions for Agenda 2063, which, as you know, is the AU's agenda and blueprint for Africa. The discussions reflected Africa's determination and ability and potential to align not only just smart business strategy, but also to contribute towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063. During the convening, because it wasn't only about talk and discussion, we also announced a number of initiatives, and I'll highlight just a few of them here to give you a flavor. Around energy, we had an announcement from Mission 300. Now, you may have heard about Mission 300 because it's also been on the news recently, coming out of the Africa Energy Summit that was held in Tanzania towards the end of January. So Mission 300 and its partners, the World Bank Group, the African Development Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, and one of our sister organizations, Sustainable Energy for All, announced an increase in their funding commitments and overall the commitment to expand energy access on the continent. As you know, the immense challenge that we face on the continent with 300 million people not having access to energy and indeed clean and sustainable energy. We know this is so critical for growing the manufacturing industry, for powering SMEs, and for really moving the continent into being more of a middle income driven economy across the continent. So countries like Togo, Mauritania, and Ghana also demonstrated how renewable mini-grids are successfully expanding energy access to communities. And Mission 300, as we know from the recent news, is really about enabling this access and opportunities for trade, for business, for education, for healthcare, and for entrepreneurship. Our sister organization, Sustainable Energy for All, also highlighted Ghana's specific energy transition and investment plan. Ghana's demonstrated bold leadership with its investment plan, targeting net zero emissions by 2060, and also job creation of about 400,000 jobs as they make this transition. Significant progress has already been made on some key projects, the e-bus project, electric bus project, and really strengthening and building up more supply of electric 2- and 3-wheeler vehicles as well. During Unstoppable Africa, we also launched Itana, which is Africa's first digital economic zone, another groundbreaking development that is really set to redefine how businesses operate and access talent across the continent. It's a digital-first environment that hopes to streamline cross-border collaboration, reducing barriers to entry for global investors, and empowering African entrepreneurs to thrive in the digital economy. Our other sister organization, UNDP, also highlighted their work that they're doing under the Timbuktu initiative, which is really designed to nurture entrepreneurial talent that is grounded in the digital economy. So through Timbuktu, entrepreneurs and innovators will gain access to funding, access to training. They will be attached to hubs, creative hubs, and create an ecosystem where the startup economy can thrive. We know the challenge around the startup economy, particularly in Africa, not enough sustained investment, not enough domestic investment, but also not enough sustainability around what we would like to achieve. In 2024, the Timbuktu Innovation Fund gained significant momentum, establishing its service center in Kigali, launching a tech hub in Lagos that focuses on fintech. Other hubs will also be set up in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, in Ghana, South Africa, and Zambia. Timbuktu has also managed to mobilize investments that will go towards 26 university innovation pods across a number of countries on the continent, from Benin to Guinea to Lesotho, Malawi, Togo, and Uganda. So just again to demonstrate really that the discussions that we have at Unstoppable Africa are really continental in nature. Digital has been a really key part of this. Google also made some announcements, and I won't talk too much about them because Charles is here, but we acknowledge really that the bold steps that Google is making around partnership, on skills building, on workshops, commitments to advancing AI and AI skills development across the continent and the region, and fostering digital innovation. Charles, we hope to hear more from you on that. Also the Black Founders Fund and a lot of the innovative work that you are doing. So the report as a whole, and I've focused on digital because it's such a critical part of transforming the African economies, digital and energy, but lots of discussion around trade, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, moving its digital protocols, investing in women and young people and their role as active agents in trade on the continent as well. Creative industry and sports, we were, lucky to have lots of sports people, fashion. We also had, the first African astronaut, Sarah Sabri from Egypt, who talked a lot about what it has taken to propel her really beyond the skies into her role as an astronaut. So we highlight all of these and other insightful parts of the dialogue that we held in September. But let's look forward, because indeed we are in 2025. And, we know that amidst all of the ongoing geopolitical and economic changes, the world continues to look at Africa for solutions to many of our global challenges, be this for food security, be it for energy security, be it for digital transformation and expansion. And I just reiterate why the platform exists. It's to ensure that Africa is at the table amidst these important political, economic, and policy discussions, and it's able to shape its own economic growth and future. So over the course of the year, we will hold and convene a series of what we call GABI bridges, regional forums that will happen on the African continent to foster dialogue and strengthen collaboration between Pan-African platforms, the private sector, and indeed global players where we convene. We'll have focused discussions, dynamic debates, really trying to tap into the pulse and the momentum of what is changing and shaping growth on the African continent. We will convene on the sidelines of the Africa CEO Forum, which will be held in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire on May 12th to 13th, 2025. And later in the year, we will convene the 4th Unstoppable Africa flagship event on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And this will be held in New York at the Marriott Marquis Hotel. This will be on the 21st and the 22nd of September. You can see the save the date there. Once again, we know that this will be the premier convening where Africa's captains of industry, political leaders, policymakers, global and regional stakeholders will come together to really, again, convene this conversation, but also drive action pathways, demonstrating the investment opportunities, the business opportunities, and the trade opportunities for Africa. So we invite you, members of the media who are gathered here, to continue to follow us on our social handles, follow us through the events, and really help us collaborate and build this narrative and reshape Africa's narrative as well. In conclusion, as I wrap up and hand over to Charles, the report which you have taps into the spirit and the momentum and the dynamism around reshaping Africa's narrative. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time. And back to you, Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Such great things happening already and so much more to come. Charles, yes, I guess it's your turn. Please share with us especially from the private sector perspective, some of these insights that, Sandra has shared, your take, the importance and the impact, that GABI is also making, as well as the importance of this project. Of course, share what, Google as well has been, doing in some of this regard also. So I'll just yield to you now for just 2 minutes to please share with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosemary, for this, and thank you, Sandra, for including us in this press conference. As you know, for us as Google, we look at sub-Saharan Africa and Africa more holistically and looking at what the potential is. And when you look at the digital decade that Africa is entering, over half the population is set to gain internet access. Over the last couple of years, Google has invested over $1 billion that has already fueled over $16 billion of economic activity as we measured in 2023. And this helps drive growth and innovation across the continent. Google is focused on equipping Africa's youth with digital skills, promoting innovation and bridging the digital divide, which aligns seamlessly with the UN's Global Digital Compact, the AU's Agenda 2063, as well as GABI's vision for the continent. And that's why we, as Google, are keen to partner with UN Compact to bring GABI. Through technology, Google believes that Africa's integration will spur economic inclusion and economic growth, creating jobs, bridging the digital divide, and really tackling some of the key challenges that we have on the continent, such as unemployment, as well as skills mismatches. As you may know, by 2050, more than a third of the world's workforce is going to be right here on the continent. We therefore need to prepare our youth to be ready to take on these opportunities and really service the world. Through influential platforms such as GABI, Google is expanding its impact across the continent and really forging strategic partnerships with visionary individuals, organizations, and most importantly, governments who are core to driving sustainable development, as well as building an inclusive and more innovative and prosperous Africa. As you may be aware, Google's priorities in Africa revolve around encouraging digital skills growth as well as workforce development. This is going to take as improving the connectivity as well as investing in infrastructure expansion, providing support for startups and entrepreneurs such as the Black Founders Fund, as well as the Launchpad program that we have, as well as championing artificial intelligence and innovation on the continent. Our focus on Africa is also going to be really looking at how do we leverage cloud technology to drive seamless services delivery across e-commerce, across digital payments, financial inclusion, and most importantly, AI-driven sustainability and climate initiatives, such as some of the work that we're doing in Ghana in our research center there, whereby we've launched programs such as a locust prevention program focused for flood forecasting to prevent property damage, etc. For us at Google, GABI serves as a really critical convening together with the UN, whereby working closely with the AU as well as the global private sector, because we can't do this alone. We can be able to drive this digital transformation, enhancing this connectivity, as I spoke about, across the continent. So we see GABI as an invaluable platform to advance Google's vision and initiatives across the continent. GABI holds a really interesting position whereby we can be able to see how we convince all the different stakeholders from the technology space, including African and global private sector leaders, government leaders, philanthropic organizations, as well as academia. At the last GABI, we actually launched our AI skilling workshop for policymakers. And the reason we did this is we understand that for Africa to have the right frameworks for AI, we need to have all the policymakers at the table. We need to ensure that the policymakers understand the potential and impact of AI going forward. And this particular workshop at GABI in 2024 laid a really good foundation for the upcoming AI Summit on Africa that's going to be held in Kigali later on this year. So for us at Google, we urge the adoption of technology across the continent, both by private sector as well as government, leveraging AI and cloud to drive efficiencies on the continent so that we can be able to spur economic growth across the board. So together, I know that we can achieve more and we shall be unstoppable. Thank you so much, and back to you, Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Charles. Together, indeed, we can achieve more. So right about now, we're going to be taking some questions. I see questions already, very quickly, because we also want to keep to time. So I'll just be asking, Sandra and Charles intermittently. And this is for Sandra. So the first question here is, GABI 2024 has placed a strong emphasis on reshaping Africa's financial narrative. What concrete steps do you believe needs to be taken in short term to accelerate private sector investment and mobilize domestic resources to unlock Africa's economic potential? And this is from Nigel Ndolovu, Newsday, Zimbabwe.
Nigel, thank you. Thank you for that question. It really speaks to the heart of what we are aiming to do with GABI, which is two things. One, make sure there's very strong private sector engagement. No economy will grow only from public sector. The private sector is such a key part of economic growth, but also secondly, as you say, seeing how we can mobilize domestic investment. So when you take a look at the report, what you will see is a couple of those outcomes. And that for us just really shows that the process has worked. Because what do we do at GABI? We've identified what we feel are 5 key sectors where both domestic and international capital can come and really gain a return on an investment. And just to reiterate them again, it's energy, which covers many things, including, for example, critical minerals and not simply, grid electricity and solar. It's the digital transformation. Charles has spoken to that. There's trade and inclusive growth. How do we build domestic markets, service our own purchasing needs even before we aim to export to other parts of the world, the creative industry, and sports. So what we want to do at GABI is, first of all, highlight the investment, business, and trade opportunities therein. And by so doing, bringing together government and political leaders who we have challenged to make sure that they can create a more enabling environment for business to happen, by bringing in private sector leaders who have spoken to public leaders and also said, look, this is what we need. We need better harmonization of tariffs. We need to be sure that, the tax regimes are favorable. People have talked about how we need to fully support the AfCFTA to maturity so that we can build those domestic markets. Private sector have come on board themselves directly and said, look, here's a set of bankable, investable projects that we want both domestic as well as international capital to come and invest in and result in economic growth. So what we really are is an incredible platform to demonstrate what exists on the African continent, what success has looked like, but also to ask the hard questions and challenge ourselves, both across the public and private sector, as to what we need to do more to create this enabling environment for strong and sustainable investment. So I just highlighted a few of the initiatives that have come to fruition under GABI. Charles has spoken to them too, but certainly in the summary report, you'll get a lot more information on it. But, uniquely, it's bringing that dialogue together between the public and the private sector and addressing what we see as roadblocks and barriers.
Thank you so much, Sandra. So we have another one here from Angie De La Victor, December Mungu, and from Top African News. And the question is, can you elaborate on the role of young entrepreneurs and the burgeoning tech industry in Africa and how GABI plans to support their growth in future initiatives? There's a mention of tech there, so I don't know.
That one is for Charles.
Charles, you want to take this on?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. I think for us on the continent, if we do not take the young folks seriously, we're not going to grow the continent, both from a social perspective as well as an economic perspective. So we really do need to double down on how we prepare our young people to be ready. And that's why for us as Google, for instance, we have different initiatives that are really focused on delivering results and skills growth for these young people. So for instance, over the last 7 years, we've trained over 6.4 million Africans on digital skills. We've gone further in investing over $7 million in the Black Founders Fund through 2 cohorts, which have gone on to raise an incremental $75 million post the investment that Google put in as seed capital for these entrepreneurs. More recently, in South Africa, we just launched another initiative that's focused on young Black-owned businesses for entrepreneurs, specifically around the e-commerce space, because we believe that we also need to develop that. So this is a really broad question, but the way I can summarize it is that young Africans are really critical into the growth of it, the economy. We as Google have been investing to ensure that we drive better skills development and also create communities that will help them grow. And this is an initiative whereby we continue to amplify. And whenever we are at GABI, we raise these issues on that platform where there are policymakers, where there are other private sector companies, so that we can do more. Because even if we've trained 6.4 million Africans, there's a lot more that continue to need that training and skills development. So we need to collaborate more. Thank you.
Absolutely. We need to collaborate more. Sandra, this one is definitely for you. The Unstoppable Africa event has now firmly established itself as a key global platform for Africa's economic agenda. As we look towards 2025, what are the key priorities that will drive this year's discussions, and how do you see its role shaping policy and investment decisions for Africa's sustainable growth? And this is from Jakto Lawi from The Star, Kenya.
Hello, Jackson, and thank you. Good question. We will continue to focus on the 5 thematic areas that we've talked about: energy, access and transitions, digital transformation, inclusive growth and trade, the creative industry, and sports. We still believe they're so critical to Africa's business, trade, and investment. So we'll keep at those areas and to be able to do that. Unpacking each of those has so many different layers and so many other business opportunities therein. So we will stick to that. I mean, the second part of the question was how to get the private sector more engaged, Rosemary? Yeah. So the engagement, I think to some extent it's happening itself. We see it, and if you look at, let me just first look at, what's going on globally, politically around the world. I think as the worlds continue to transition, there's wars that are, ongoing, resources are being depleted. People are looking for where they can put their investments in and be able to get a relatively strong return on investment. Statistics tell us that 9 out of the 20 fastest growing economies are on the African continent. Charles has spoken to a lot of the opportunity that we see there in terms of infrastructure. If you've talked about the energy, the solar potential, the consumer market, certainly the talent pool market, etc. So what we are seeing and finding is that private sector leaders themselves, both African as well as global, are really looking at the continent and trying to say, what can we do here to be able to drive business and investment and trade? I want to reiterate, and why GABI is so important for us. It's about making sure that Africans themselves are at the forefront of these discussions, being part of deliberating how resources shall be accessed. And so that the policy environment is so critical. We do want to make sure that we can ride on frameworks within the African Union, issues such as the AFCFTA and how it plans to advance trade on the continent, the Sustainable Development Goals, issues around equity and access is so important. So it's not simply about creating a business platform, it's about creating a business platform where Africa can also be in control of shaping how the narrative and how business, trade, and investment flows.
Fantastic. There's a question here, and I think I've received 2 of it actually, and it's from Ogbonna, BBC Africa. And it says, does GABI plan on hosting its annual summit of this scale in Africa? If so, what country will be the first to have this honor? Like I said, I've gotten 3 of those questions. I think it's a recurring question, Sandra.
Well, so we will definitely continue to build our presence on the continent, Our flagship event will remain here in New York, but we are definitely building our roots on the continent. But to your question, Opona, it's like asking me to choose my favorite child or my favorite relative out of all of those. What we're going to do is leverage what already exists on the continent. We don't want to duplicate or replicate. So already we work with the Africa CEO Forum. As I've mentioned, last year we had a successful convening with them in Kigali. This year in May, they're going to convene in Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire. We will leverage that because they've already successfully brought together, I think last year was close to 2,000 CEOs. I can't recall how many heads of state. So we leverage that, we partner with them, and we hold our events there. We will also be present at the African Union. As you know, they have two summits this year, February and one in July at the mid-year. We want to explore opportunities there. It's a great moment to be in the presence of heads of state and also demonstrate what the business potential is. So those are the first two that we have in mind. But let me also, highlight the fact that GABI is a platform. And through, for example, because Charles is here, I would imagine when Charles has his own engagements on the continent, GABI is a message that he carries through the potential of the platform in their own engagements. So, with many of our partners, Google is one, Afrexim is the other, and, I can highlight a few more. The idea is that, some of our key ambassadors also continue through their work to demonstrate, again, what we're trying to do through GABI, which is to advocate for investments, business, and trade on the African continent. But no, there's no favorite out of all of the African countries. We're here for everybody.
For everybody. When Africa wins, everyone wins.
Yes.
Fantastic. Charles, this one is definitely for you. It says the GABI 2024 Executive Summary highlights Africa's rapid digital transformation and critical role of digital upskilling programs, just as Sandra mentioned. How is Google Africa contributing to bridging the digital divide? And what more needs to be done to ensure African youth are equipped with the skills to thrive in the digital economy? And this is from Collins Nweze, The Nation newspaper, Nigeria.
Collins, thank you for that question. Fantastic question and core to what we do in Africa. So just more recently, we launched a paper called the AI Sprinters late last year. And on AI Sprinters, the premise of this builds on what we call the digital sprinters, which is about how Africa can leverage technology to sprint ahead and drive economic growth and inclusion across the continent. And we highlighted 4 key pillars under this. The first one is around investment in digital, and so digital infrastructure. So we at Google have been investing across the board in different infrastructure, such as the South African cloud region, Equiano, which is a subsea cable that stretches from Europe to Cape Town. And more recently, last year, we launched Umoja, which basically connects Africa to Australia. So that's on the infrastructure piece. The second piece, which touches on the question you're asking, is around skilling and skills development. Because if you have connectivity, but you do not have the skills that are required, especially for the young people, but not just the young people, we also need to upskill the people who are currently in different jobs so that when the roles are changing and technology is impacting those roles, they are ready to really develop and take those opportunities. So the second pillar of the AI Sprinters is around skilling. But I want to touch on the other 2 pillars, which are looking at how do you drive technological adoption across the board, anchored by government, so that we can be able to drive better and more efficient government services for citizens, which is going to reduce a lot of the leakage that we've seen across the continent. So we need to really drive that technological adoption. But lastly, having the right policies in place. And this is really critical and impacts the young people. So for instance, more recently, the AU passed the Africa AU Startup Framework. And this framework looks at how can African startups be supported by their governments to really create an ease of economic growth, which is then going to enable the expansion of those startups, both across the continent, but across the world as well. And if you can be able to do that, you create more jobs, young people have opportunities, and therefore more holistically, as I love the saying, with a rising tide, all boats rise, right? So we need to really bring all those skill sets. We need to work collaboratively. I know I keep talking about collaboration because when you look at the forecast of population in Africa, no one organization or institution or government can be able to solve and tackle the challenges that we have. But collectively, we can be able to do that. And forums such as GABI, where you can be able to bring different minds together in one space who can be able to have proper measurable accomplishments that we measure in terms of how we're going to move things forward, it's really going to help our youth and more holistically, our continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really about collaborations and partnerships. And I love that, sentence you made. With the rising tide, all boats rise. I'm just taking notes here. One more question for Sandra. Please let me check if I'm doing well with time. Yes. And it says, how does GABI intend to ensure funding? To ensure funding is decentralized to remote or rural areas in Africa to ensure energy transition and target is achieved. I'll take that again. How does GABI intend to ensure funding is decentralized to remote or rural areas in Africa to ensure energy transition and target is achieved? And this is from Prince Ensian from the Star FM in Accra, Ghana.
Thank you, Prince. So yeah, let me reflect on the Africa Energy Summit that just ended last week. I think at its conclusion, about $8 billion of pledges were made. We're not taking credit for that. I think it's been a momentum that has built over time with many incredible partners and investors. But as I mentioned earlier, it was one of our early discussions when GABI convened here in September last year. And it's that catalytic impact and the ongoing momentum that we want to keep making sure that we can be part of. Now, ours is not necessarily to make sure that the funding is decentralized, but it's to highlight the investment opportunity therein. If I look at the feedback or, the news reporting that has happened, it is a key preoccupation, even of those who have participated in the Energy Summit. So they are mobilizing funding to address some of the bigger issues, the energy infrastructure, what needs to happen around policy, where we need to have those investments in grid. But I'm very sure at the national government level, one of the key preoccupations is also what they call the last mile. I mean, it happens in digital as well. But how do you actually move from this large centralized grid down to the household, down to the SME person, down to really making sure that energy is not simply energy, but it's energy that is used for business, for healthcare, for trade, et cetera, et cetera. So our role really is to make sure that we are able to bring together policymakers and business people to have those discussions, to make sure that the enabling environment is there, to ask the hard questions about why is this not happening at the pace and the scale that it should. But implementation, as well as the resource allocation, really primarily does happen at the national level. And I think for us, it's about shining a light on where that opportunity is.
So speaking about opportunities, I have one final question here, and then we'll just take your closing remarks. And this is from Adeyemi Obadimu from News Extra Nigeria. And it says, what opportunities and challenges do you think GABI will face in achieving its goals? Can you hear me?
Sorry, was that for me or for Charles?
For you, Mom.
Okay, say again. What? And I thought it was for Charles, so I was waiting for it.
Because you mentioned opportunities, so yes. I just leveraged on that. It says, what opportunities and challenges do you think GABI will face in achieving its goals?
Yeah, okay. So, let me first start with opportunities because many of them abound. I think, first of all, I think there is one, as I've said, almost an abundance of resources and an abundance of business opportunities. I think African economies are so untapped. There's so much potential that we talk about, so much opportunity for economies to move from low income to middle income, to seize the opportunities of digital, to seize the opportunities of driving more manufacturing, to drive forward more, to build strong service industries, to strengthen the agricultural potential that lies within there. But, for all of these opportunities, I think what we see is what we need to put in place for Africa and the continent to thrive. So I'm just going to focus on three things that one may call challenges. For us, they're the discussion points, the levers, and the reason why we try to bring public and private together. I think the first is, at a policy perspective, and really what the continent of Africa with all of its member states represents. Many will say African markets are very small. And I think that's really why the AFCFTA exists, which is to look at how we can harmonize business, trade, and investment across the African continent to build up, one, our domestic market capacity, but two, to demonstrate the investment opportunity therein. So first, for me, it's about how do we harmonize trade, tariff, regulations across the continent so that doing business on the African continent is seamless, it's easy, and we can stimulate domestic spending and domestic investment. I think that is the first piece. AFCFTA is really working hard to be able to do this. The second, oftentimes people say there is a lack of, should I say, regulatory or policy stability. You invest in a country, let's say leadership changes, regulation changes, people are not sure about consistency and long-term investment. Part of this, I think, is real risk. Part of it is perceived risk. We often have this discussion about, and there was a topic last year, we called it Africa's prejudice premium, which is to what extent is the way that Africa is viewed externally impacting investment and business opportunities on the continent. I remember, I believe it was the president of Kenya who spoke and said, there is political instability in Niger, but at the same time, Kenya's international rating changes because oftentimes, and unfortunately, the continent is viewed as one. Yet what is happening in Niger across the other side of the continent is suddenly not impacting the Kenyan economy. So what do we need to do to strengthen perceptions around the stability and the investment opportunities on the country? I think third is really for us to really demonstrate the investability and the bankability of projects. It's related to my first piece. Oftentimes, and when we talk to partners like Afrexim, they'll say that when they try to mobilize investment capital, and the same for the African Development Bank, they're often told these projects are small. People are looking for projects where we're investing hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So how do we, even as the African continent, seize, I'm going to say, our regional groupings? So for example, if you're to invest in a manufacturing facility, perhaps you look at it not serving only Cameroon, but look at it servicing perhaps a regional perspective. And in that way, you can attract investment capital at scale and be able to address what we need to do. So for me, those are some of, I'll just highlight three key areas. One is addressing perception, risk perception, investor perception. Second is, being able to have predictability in the environment. And third is creating projects of scale that will attract the types of investments that we want to have. Now, those are not GABI problems only. They are problems that I think the African continent business leaders are talking about all the time. GABI aims to provide a platform where we can bring together government, private sector, policymakers, investors to really tease out the opportunities therein. But in terms of success, we feel that we're well positioned at key moments to be able to drive our narrative and certainly to shine the light as we do. It's the largest convening discussion and policy dialogue on Africa that we do here in September in New York.
Thank you. Now, Charles, we just have 5 more minutes. Your closing remarks, really, what would be your call to action at this point, based on what Sandra just shared? Very quickly, and then we'll go back to Sandra for her closing remarks as well as, the dates, right, for the next GABI event. So Charles, over to you.
So for my closing remarks, I actually want to do a favor to a couple of people who asked 2 questions that I want to respond to. The first one is around how is Google ensuring that creators are leveraged at GABI and other opportunities such as this. And I want to say they are central to the work that we do. Just in 2024 at the GABI session, we had a YouTube creators workshop that we brought YouTube creators because, as you mentioned in your question, they're really vibrant, they're really creative, and they can be able to spread the word across the board. We had YouTube creators such as Fisayo from Nigeria, who interviewed James Manyika. We had the Oddity as well, who was part of that process. So again, creators, Africa is full of creators, and we want to leverage opportunities such as GABI to give them a platform where they can shine and really showcase their skills. And then there's a question regarding Uganda and work that we've invested in Uganda. As part of the Africa Launchpad program, accelerated program, we have invested in various startups in Uganda. We've also utilized the Africa Investment Fund to do the same. So Teheka is a platform in Uganda that helps families and individuals find the right healthcare providers across Uganda. And this is one of the companies that went through our Launchpad program. At Google, leveraging the Google Africa Investment Fund, we invested in Safe Border, which is also a Ugandan originated company that spread beyond Uganda. So in summary, we do need to invest in Africa. We do need to create opportunities for our youth, such as the creators. We also need to really look at how we continue to grow the skills and ensure that we're skilling the African youth and the African populace in general to take advantage of the economic opportunity that the digital transformation and the AI era is going to provide for Africa. So those will be my closing remarks. Thank you so much, Rosemary. And thank you so much, Sanda, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. I see a lot of questions still coming in. Please send them. We cannot take all your questions, right away, but we will do our best to answer the questions. We did this last year. Keep your questions coming. We'll respond to the questions in 24 hours or less. Sanda, very quickly, your closing remark, your call to action.
My closing remarks, and thank you for all the participants. You're up to about 46 online. Is actually to just encourage those who've gathered here, the media. We've talked a lot about shaping Africa's perception, and the media plays such a critical role in building that African narrative. Earlier, I talked about perceptions around investment and how people perceive the African continent and what really happens on the African continent. So I know you do a lot and you cover a lot where you are. Mine is to see how we can work together to collaborate and find those gems of stories. And I know you see them every time. Sometimes we call them human interest. I know from there you also go and cover large political gatherings or large business gatherings. But just know that, what it is that you put out is how our continent of Africa is seen and perceived. And we're not trying to say that we are going to wash away our challenges or what is not working. It's very important to shine a light on that. But ours is to continue to build a balanced narrative around Africa and its opportunities and its challenges. So thank you for all that you do, and hope to see more of those investment opportunities, those business opportunities that are doing well. You saw featured up here, captains of industry. If you go to their story, they started small. They have incredible stories of grit and resilience and long histories of business. We need to keep on highlighting those. We're also really highlighting the massive opportunities that exist today. So thanks for your partnership and thanks for all you do on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you can agree that it has been a truly, truly insightful session. Like I said, if you have further questions, please send them. We'll do our best to respond and share with you as soon as possible. After this session, of course, we'll be sharing with you a summary of this session in the press statements. So you also receive that today. Thank you once again. It's just 2 minutes to, the top of the hour. So this time I'll just say thank you. Thank you to the entire team, at the back end, and of course, our UNGC colleagues who also joined. Thank you so much, and, see you soon. Thank you.